Hello everyone, welcome to Excel with the UT. So in today's session, we're going to cover another important functionality of Excel, and that's called data validation. So what is data validation? It is a functionality of Excel to ensure data accuracy and integrity. And how does it do that? So it does that by restricting the user whatever input he's trying to enter in any particular template, or if there is any survey that we want people to fill. So it restricts the input basis whatever is the required desired input that we want the user to fill. So there are ways we can form validation around the responses, and the user will only be able to fill in their responses when is kind of satisfying the inputs basis that validation. So what do I mean here? For example, there is a field called marital status wherein we want to understand whether the person is married or not. And we are only expecting two responses here. Either it can be a yes or it can be a no. Now, unless we don't specify or we don't restrict these responses, there are chances that the user can fill any ambiguous responses here. And the purpose of the template or the purpose of the data defeats there. So there is a way to bound this input here, and that's how we do through data validation. Similarly, if you see, we are trying to check what are the number of languages that a person can speak. Now here we only want responses in numeric format, one, two, three. We don't want what languages he speaks or the name of the languages. So this is again a different format of input that we want. And similarly, the nationality, we only want the whether the person is from India or he's from America, out of these two ethnicity only. So we are all in all these three conditions, we are restricting the user to fill in the input basis a certain format that we want. And that's what the purpose of data validation. It restricts the user to fill in the inputs basis a certain criteria or the validation that we have done. And we can define these validations through using drop downs, by using a particular sharing a particular format that you can use, or defining the length of the character, text, whole number, dates. There are different ways. And also we can show him there are ways to display the messages of what input there can be inputted. And if there is a breach of the validation, there is also a way to show the error message so that the user can know that is not inputting in the correct way. So let's jump onto the data. So, so this is a template I'm trying to create here, wherein I'm trying to gather the sales data for certain brands of drinks in India for certain months. And I've picked up few categories wherein I would be trying to create a validation rules for each category. This is the requirement that I have. And let's see how the data validation works and how we can use. So we're starting with the city. What city we want the person to have uh, the sales here. So we can simply go to data, and this is the data validation uh, entry. So this is the data validation input. We can click here, and it opens a dialog box, which, let me clear the data validation which was there earlier. Okay, so simply we can go to the data, we can click on this data validation option, and it opens a dialog box wherein it shows different options in front of us. So we see this validation criteria, and it is the list of all the validation rules which I was speaking earlier, which we can devise for these particular attributes that we are wanting to get the data. And basis these validation rules, the users can input their data. So let's say uh, for the input wherein we want the city, it's going to be a list because there are we are expecting the names of the city, and that is a list here. So let's choose the list here. Now, as simple as giving the names of the city here, we can simply manually do it. Let's say we put in few cities, and we can simply type the cities using the comma separator. And we have manually punched the three cities that we feel should be part of the responses, and we press OK. Now, if you see here, it has thrown up a drop down, and when we click this drop down, it has given you the list of cities which are part of the responses. You can click any of these cities, and that becomes part of the responses. You can click the other city, and that becomes the part of the responses. Now, if you try to put any other city which is not part of the validation, there is an error that it throws. So this is a way to restrict the user to enter any other city out of those three. Now let's now let's choose the brands of the drinks that we want to enter into the template. Now we saw one way wherein we entered the city manually into the validation criteria, and we typed the cities uh, we typed the city into the dialog box. Now, every time it is not easy to type and update the validation responses. So, what is the other way? The other way is to give a reference uh, of the list that you've already created. So, for example, if I talk about the brands here, the brands of the drinks here, I've created a list here, and I've mentioned the list somewhere like this. And all I can do is give a reference of the list in this data validation. So I click the data validation. I use the option list here. Now, instead of choosing manually, I'll simply give the reference of this list here. Now, if you see, I've given the reference of the list uh, that I've mentioned on the other page, and it has taken all the brands here. Now I can simply select from the drop down. So this is how you can enter the values by referencing it to a list that you have created, and you don't have to type it manually one by one. Now, it's not always necessary that the brands remain constant, and there can be a addition or a deletion from this list. And how do we do that? So one way is to go here and you add the name here, and again in the data validation tab you change the reference here. Now that's a little tedious, as every time it's difficult to uh, add and change the reference here. So there are ways to do that. So one way can be you can do that by inserting a row here and writing your brand here. So let's say Red Bull new, and I say enter. So the moment you enter your entry in between the list and you go back to your brands, you see your entry has come here. So this is one way wherein you can go to the list, and instead of typing it in the last, you can insert it in between, so that doesn't change the overall range and it treats the inclusion in between. So that's one way of doing that. Also, you can do that by you typing the list and simply pressing shift and moving it up. The moment you move it up, it all it already treats it that you have kind of included it into the list, and see the options come into the drop down here. So that's how you can include the validations in. You can increase the list by putting the value in between the list. Okay, and when you go to the drop down, you can see you have included that. Now there is a more efficient way than this, wherein you don't have to enter uh, the brand in between always, and you can simply enter the values at the end and it can be taken care of. So how that can be done, let me show you here. You take the list and you use the method of table. You do control T and it creates a table out of your list. Okay, and you say okay here. Also, you can give a name of your table. Let's say brand my. That's the name of the table that you've given. Also, if you don't want the custom formatting, you can clear the custom formatting so that you have the regular look here. Now, if you see here, I have created a table, and if I say equal to and I choose the table, it automatically chooses the table here, and it how it takes the reference, it takes the name of the table and the name of the header, it takes the reference. So you can copy this. So you can copy this, press escape, go to the data validation. And now let me just give back, let me just give the reference of the table here that we have created. Let's say okay. So this is the problem here. So data validation does not recognizes the reference of a table, and it gives you an error here. So how can we do and give a reference of the table here? So there is a way. We use a function called indirect, and now I'll give the reference of the table. So what does the formula indirect does? It will, so I will give the reference of the table in form of a text, and the function indirect will simply convert the text reference into a range reference. And now if I press OK, you can see it has taken the reference of the table that we have created. Now, the efficient way that I was talking about, if you want to increase the list here, let's say new mineral, and you just add in the bottom, and that will be incorporated directly into the dropdown. So you don't have to worry about inserting new rows or inserting the additions into the list in between. You can simply go and add the uh, entries just in the last, and it will, because of the functionality of the table, it will be incorporated into the drop down automatically. So this is a more efficient way of using the list making it dynamic, so that every time there is an addition or there is a deletion, the drop down will always cater to it. Now let's move to another attribute, date here. And for example, we want to let the user give the date. Let's go to the data validation. And obviously, if you see here, the validation criteria that we're trying to choose here, it has the date. So this is the most suitable validation criteria that we can choose. So we choose the date, and it gives you the range of validation that you can do here. So let's say we're trying to ask the user to input a date which is greater than 1st Jan and it is greater than 2018. We'll say okay. Now also there is an option to say input message. Let's say check the date range, and we say here input date greater than 2018 Jan. We'll say okay. Now it gives you a prompt wherein the user knows that the date should be greater than Jan 2018. So let's say I'm putting a date which is 0101/2017. It gives you the error. Okay. And the moment we make it 2018, and let's say this is 4th, it's successful. Okay. So we also have this functionality of the message prompt message here, which allows the user to see if there are any certain conditions that he need to check, or the data has to be filled basis this. So we use the input message here to allow user to see what all the conditions that are expected here. Now let's move to the sales target. Now this is an attribute wherein we are trying to ask the user to enter the target, but uh, what is the range of the target? We want the user to give the target between a certain range, because otherwise there can be endless numbers which can be the target. So let's see, let's choose the whole number which seems to be the most suitable validation criteria here. And the minimum target that we want to give is 10, and the maximum target that we want to give is 50. Let's also create an input message. Let's say target range, and let's say choose between 10 and 50. Let's say okay. Now you can see the prompt is, as clearly mentioned, that the target has to be between 10 and 50. So somebody, if he puts the target at 60, it gives you the message. It's an error message. Now again, if you go back and put the target within the range, it accepts this. Now also, the error message, that comes as a prompt, you can customize that as well. And you can mention the error that you want to show the user. Target range, let's say target range outside specified range. And let's say okay. Now if I give the range as 60, so you can see the error is what we have specified in the error box. and this is the error that we wanted to give the user so that he understands what's wrong that he's doing. Okay, now if we put the target within the specified range, it accepts it. Now for the simply for the month, uh, we can again go back to the data validation criteria. uh, let's say we're trying to give the month, and we're trying to ask the user to give the month in 3 characters. So let's define the character length as 3 and say the input message character length should be 3. Say OK. So if you press Jan, it will accept. If you put more than Jan, it gives you an error message. So this is how you can use a text related validation criteria, and you can give the prompt message as well so that the user can know what is expected here. Now target met, we simply want to create a yes or a no kind of a field. So simply let's give yes or no, and when we say OK, so simply the target met options that we try to user fill the user is yes or a no. So this is how you can create validations basis different formats or different kind of uh, values that you want user to enter. Now, if you want more rows to have this validation, you can simply copy this validation, and the number of rows you want users to have this validation, you can simply copy and do a value paste, and value paste using validation. When you do that, now you can see your validation has been copied till the rows that you've copied here, and now the user can enter in a different row the same validation that you wanted him to choose. So this is how you create the whole template again, and you can restrict the users to use input the values basis whatever the required template that you want to share them. I hope the video helpful. Let me know in the comments if there are any specific things that you want me to make more videos on. Thanks.